So today we are going to be making a vegetable rosti. So I've already done a little bit of prep work in order to be ready for this. So I've already parboiled my root vegetables. So that leads me to my first question of what does parboil mean? So what do I mean by that term, parboil? So I'm now just going to drain away that water. So those are going to be quite hot still. So the way that you can cool them down quickly is by just running it through cold water, or you can just leave them to one side whilst you prepare your other ingredients. So you can see the type of things that I've got here. I've got my egg, my flour ready for later. I've got my grater, which I'm just going to use straight onto the chopping board. I have added a little bit of garlic into mine because I don't have any spring onions, so I'm just adapting the recipe. So this leads me to another question of how could you adapt this recipe to maybe change it to your family's likes and dislikes. So what could you do to adapt this recipe? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do whilst everything is just cooling is I'm just going to take the end off my courgette, and I'm not going to need it. And then all I'm going to do is start grating. When you're grating, please make sure that you keep your fingers well away from the sharp bit of your grater. Now, some graters do have lots of different sides. Do make sure that you're using this type of configuration for your grating. You don't want them too small. The courgettes are very high in water, so if you go any smaller, they then just turn to mush. So continue to do that. Now you'll notice that I'm continually moving my fingers until I can't go any further. Now what you might find is that obviously that's quite a bit of courgette that we've not been able to use. So what you can do is you can use a fork and just pop that into the end there, and then you can continue to grate, and that fork is then just your guard to protect your fingers, and you can see that I've got hardly anything left now. So you can use that method for any of the ingredients that we're using today. And then that can all just go into a bowl. Potato. So it does say in the recipe that you can peel it, but actually I've just kept it whole because there's quite a lot of goodness in the skin of the potato that we don't want to lose. Now you're going to find that your potato it's quite sticky. So another question for you: why is the potato so much stickier than the other veg that we're going to be using today? So you will see that it does say in the recipe again that you need to top and tail your carrots. I've not, just that means that I've then got something to put the fork into. So there we go, we've got all of our veg in there. Whilst I did say that it's you could adapt the recipe, a couple of things that you do need to make sure that you have is probably one of them is the potato. So do make sure that you have got some potato in there that you've grated. And then I'm just mixing that round. Obviously I've got the garlic in there that I've chopped up. So I just want to make sure that that's well combined. I'm then just going to add my pinch of salt and pepper. So why do we season food? Why do we season foods? That's another question for you. So, or another way of wording it is, what's the function of salt and pepper in any sorts of dishes and food? So having given that a good mix. So what I'm now going to do is add my egg and flour. So what is the function of the egg and flour in this recipe? So what is the function of the egg and the flour in this recipe? So give it a really good mix, make sure that you've got that egg and flour all well combined. So you'll notice it's a slightly wetter sort of consistency now, which is good. And then all I'm going to do is start to sort of portion up my my mixture, and I'm going to put it into my frying pan. Just going to use a teaspoon of oil in the first instance, and then I can add more later if I need to. So just allow that oil just to get a little bit hot, just so that it starts cooking straight away. Now, because the egg is in there, it is going to help cook this quickly. And once it's in, you can kind of shape it a little bit, but do be careful. If you are using a metal spoon, remember that the spoon is a conductor, so it will heat. If it gets too hot, it will then travel up and you'll burn yourself. So that just begins to cook, and you are just wanting to leave them. Please don't try and fiddle with them or do anything else with them. Let them cook to start with before you then try and turn them over. Otherwise it then becomes very difficult and they break to pieces. So they need about 3 to 4 minutes on each side. Do make sure that you're playing around with the temperature. If it's really starting to smoke, turn the heat right down. Or if it is getting far too hot, move it off the hot hob and move it onto a cold one, and that will then bring the heat down much quicker. So when you come to turning these, you're going to have to turn them quite quick because obviously the top part hasn't cooked yet. They may break apart a little bit, but as long as you're quick, they should turn quite quickly. And as the pan gets hotter, it will be quicker to cook. Just going to add a little bit more oil. It's sticking quite a lot to the pan. So once they're then cooked, you can get them onto a baking tray or a plate. I'm just putting them onto a baking tray because that way then what we can do is for lunch heat them back up again and we can have them hot. So it does mean that you then continue to cook them as well. Needing a lot more oil in this frying pan than I thought. And then you can just continue with the rest of your mixture. So once you're finished with your frying pan, do just leave that to one side. Your frying pan will be very, very hot. Obviously you can see that I've got quite a bit of oil still in that pan. Now if I were to add water to that, that could then become a fire risk. So do make sure that you leave your frying pan to cool down completely before you try and wash it up. You'll notice that actually the colour slightly improves as my cooking went on. So these were the first ones that I did compared to these ones which were the last ones that I did. And actually these sorts of colours are much better. So I probably needed to leave these first ones just a little bit longer. But hopefully once they're in the oven and we reheat them for our meal, the colour will improve. So all of the cooking is now done. Because the egg is so small, it does cook very quickly. So I know that these are all cooked, even though they don't have the colour on them. So just to remind you of the 5 questions that I've set through this. So it's, what does parboil mean? What is the function of the egg and flour in the recipe? What is the function of salt and pepper, or why do we season dishes? How could you adapt this recipe? And what makes the potato quite sticky? When we were grating it, it became quite sticky. So why does that happen? What's in the potato that makes that happen? Good luck.